Welcome to the Monday, September 21st, Education Committee and Supplementary regular meeting of the Board of School Directors. I will turn the meeting over to Mr. Copeland.
Thank you. Now, we have an audience recognition
Thank you.
portion.
Denise got me. It's been a while. If there's anyone from the audience that would like to make public comment at this time, if you would come forward and sign in with Ms. LaPera. There's a 3-minute time limit for public comment. Yes, agenda items, thank you. No? Seeing none? Now I will turn the meeting over to our superintendent.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our first item that I'd like for the board's consideration is action on the school district calendar. As everybody knows, the area is fortunate enough to have a papal visit, but that papal visit also encourages us to be mindful of what it may do to traffic and other abilities for us to get students to where we need them to go. We've already identified for the public the possibility or the practicality that, in fact, we will be closed on Friday. The administration further recommends that the Board of School Directors approve the following. One, a redesignation of September 25th, 2015 from a student day to a day when schools and offices are closed. Secondly, authorizing the administration to request the Pennsylvania Department of Education to approve Act 80 exception for September 28, 2015 for curriculum planning and development, strategic planning, in-service programs dealing with new students or activities having an impact on the education program. The request, if approved, shall only be used if the superintendent determines pursuant to Board Policy 804 to make September 28, 2015 a day when students are not present. These recommendations are being made due to the travel restrictions and uncertainties created by the papal visit occurring in Philadelphia on September 26 to 27, 2015. I am not anticipating the need to close schools on Monday, but as I drive throughout the region, I think all of us see the warning signs about congestion and so forth and so on, and I just don't want to wake up on Monday morning, and realize that we have an extreme difficult situation in getting our buses up and running and our students to and from school safely. So this is a precautionary measure. You plan for the worst and hope for the best, and that's what this does.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the motion? Okay, is there a motion to approve?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We'll now move to the election of our Pennsylvania School Board Association officers. I'm going to have our legislative chair, Dr. Maureen O'Leary, read off who we plan to endorse.
Thank you. The Legislative Committee looked over the credentials and the recommendations on each of the candidates. For President-elect, we endorsed Mark Miller. For Vice President, Michael Facinetto. And for Eastern at-large representative, Larry Feinberg. And should I make a motion that we approve those? Okay, so I move that we approve those and make those our official vote for our PSBA representatives.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll turn it over to Mr. Copeland again.
Thank you. First, let me just say a thank you for everybody for welcoming me again as we begin our school year. It's been a good opening. It comes with some of the glitches and concerns that have happened at the beginning of every year in terms of supplies or transportation or so forth. But overall, this has been a really good opening. Before we get into the assessment presentation, I just wanted to also, for the public's benefit, sort of outline where I see the year coming. First of all, the board and the superintendent had a retreat on evaluation, my evaluation, and laid out some broad strokes in terms of what my goals and therefore the district goals are going to be for this year. And I just wanted to briefly mention those in terms of topics with the board and the public. Not in any particular order, but first and foremost, the strategic plan. The Lower Merion School District Strategic Plan, quite frankly, is like no other document I've ever seen. It's one of the most compelling advocacy pieces on behalf of public education that I have ever seen in my entire career. It says that in a time of all kinds of demands from state departments of education and fiscal restraint and pulls on our resources, the Lower Merion School District, its administration, its teachers, its community are firmly committed to moving forward with an education that's superior, not regressive. And I think this is what was compelling for me to put in my advocacy and my candidacy for the board, and getting this strategic plan up and running and implemented after the fine work of the development that's been done so far is one of the primary reasons that I am pleased to be the superintendent of schools, and I look forward to continuing to work with the board and a committed group of professionals and community members throughout the year. Another goal that the board has charged me with is managing growth of the district. Now, when we say manage the growth, there's not a whole lot I can do when people decide to show up with students, and that's a good thing, because, you know, well, I won't go into that, but that's just something that's going to happen. But along with that comes the reality that as our numbers grow, we are required to hire more teaching staff. There's more of a pull on the resources of the district, and managing that along with the facilities issues is something that we have to take a look at. In the upcoming weeks, we'll be presenting the Board of Education with some options in terms of how we need to be able to deal with the increase of people wanting to come to the Lower Merion School District. Third, there was a significant investment in special services over the summer and a complete reorganization of that department. So one of the things that we want to do this year is see how that's going and really do some program evaluation and program rollout in the area of special services. And finally, even though it's part of the strategic plan, the achievement gap. Making sure that everybody, when we use the term all forward, we mean everybody, and we move the entire district regardless on anything. And to that extent, one of the things that you're going to hear from us tonight is the annual presentation of PSSA and Keystone data. Now, long before I got to the Lower Merion School District, the Board of Education had a resolution. They took a stand. They said, there are some reasons to do testing, but some of the reasons we do it, we don't like. We don't like the heavy-handedness. We don't like the over-reliance on it. You all obviously know what that resolution was, and I think it's spot on. So finding a balance between how we look at data and information and what we do with it matters greatly. So tonight, even though and especially since we're going to be taking a look at it, I'm going to, as we go through this, make some comments where, at least from my point of view, I think further restraint and study on the Department of Education would benefit not only the Lower Merion School District, but everyone. So with that, I'd ask Brian Cody, who's filling in secondary education, to begin with the presentation. Brian, if you could call up the first few slides. This presentation was provided for the curriculum committee last week. This is an abbreviated presentation, and I'm going to take you through the first several slides before I turn it over to Brian for the numerical stuff. The information that you have up here is from the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and they've made 4 points that they want parents to know. So let me emphasize, this is from the Pennsylvania Department of Education. But I think we do have an obligation to at least share this with our parent community. What the first slide says is this past spring, there was a new PSSA. And you can read this for yourselves. What it really says is there's a new test. So comparing one year to the next is really not fair or appropriate because it's a very different kind of design. The assessment was first PSA to be fully aligned, to a rigorous PA core standards, and the PA core standards are, as they say, intended to better prepare Commonwealth students for college and career readiness. The next point, that this, in fact, this is something that that school districts and the Pennsylvania Department of Education has been saying for some time. Because it's a new test, they knew that the scores were going to be lower than they were the year before. And that's true in almost every single category. But you will see at least a couple of categories where Lower Merion schools, unlike the rest of the state of Pennsylvania, actually were able to maintain the achievement that they had the year before. The third point rather, is that this deals with college readiness. Now, you have to bear with me a second. Slide says the process of developing the new standards and scaling scores was undertaken with thoroughness, thoughtfulness by a committee of Pennsylvania educators. I have no doubt that that was true. You're laughing. That's not helping me my presentation. I do believe that they sat down, and I do believe that they tried to be as thorough as they could. But here's the part that I'm concerned about, or one of the parts that I'm concerned about in terms of these assessments. There's a concept called instructional sensitivity. And instructional sensitivity, you want to make sure that if you're going to measure how well something was taught and measure those people who are teaching it, it has to be related to the question. Have you ever taken a multiple choice test or answered a multiple choice question where you really didn't know what the concept was, but because of the way that the question was worded, you could guess at the answer and you could get it right? That means there's low instructional sensitivity. Why? Because no matter what instruction you got, you were able to get it correct. Conversely, you look at a test question, you were taught well, and because of the question or because of something else, you couldn't get it correct. So that's instructional insensitivity at the other end. I do not believe, and I have not been shown, that the Pennsylvania Department of Education has gone through that rigorous process to determine the instructional sensitivity of test questions, and I think that that's a concern. Another issue that I have with the way we do the assessment is we don't get the test back so that we can look at the items and we can see item by item how the students do. I asked if we could contact the state. Did they get back to us on the writing samples? They have not. I'm relatively new to Pennsylvania. I asked in my last district if we could see the student writing samples. I was told very politely, no, you cannot. I thought this was a strange thing. Why not let us see how the kids, what the actual writing samples? They should be able to hand them back. I went to my fellow superintendents in Bucks County. Mr. Klein may remember this. And we jointly wrote a letter to the Department of Education, and they politely said, you can have it back. We had to pay for it, and it was a little annoyed that I had to pay for the return of my own students' work, but we did, and it was an ability for people to sit down and actually look at what the questions were and how kids did. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to coordinate curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And when you take a test farther away from that, it becomes more problematic for teachers to use it in the classroom. So we've asked if we can have the new test. We have not heard back from them. And the last point is that the standardized tests are not the sole indicator of student achievement. Now, we agree with this, and I would respectfully suggest that this concept is one that I would like the state to be a little bit more on board with, because I think by placing so much emphasis, they contradict their own determination in terms of where we are. Having said that, Brian and his folks have done a lot of work on this information, and we want to take the opportunity to give you a rather high-level overview of where the Lower Merion schools are relative to these measures. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. Good evening, Board. What you see before you right now is a sample of the student report parent letters that will be mailed home either tomorrow or Thursday of this week. So I wanted to just sort of highlight a couple of things within this report. Although the test itself has changed, a lot of the dynamics about the reporting remain a constant. So the below basic, the basic, proficient, and advanced performance levels will still be indicated with the red, yellow, green, and blue, something that parents have seen in the past with this particular report. There's language on this particular report that explains what each assessment was about and the dynamics that are wrapped around this particular assessment in terms of performance levels. One of these particular reports for English language arts, you'll see will have a sliding scale bar at the top indicating the student's achievement with a dark arrow with the score number beside that, indicating at what level of basic or below basic, basic, proficient, or advanced your student actually performed. Below within the graphs, you'll see the reporting categories with the student's total score, and then the total possible points, and then a strength profile. These strength profiles are actually designated to provide an indication of the student's performance within each of the reporting categories, and the strength profile takes into account the difficulty of the assessment questions and can be used to identify the student's strengths or the areas of need. And we see that in the math report as well. So this indication also shows areas in which you might see the same score that a student would score in one particular reporting category with the same possible points. And in this case, we see the number systems and the statistics probability where the student scored a 10 and the scale was a possible 14 points. However, the strength profile is medium for the number systems, and the statistic and probability is a high. And again, that's the fluctuation in the assessment questions that we talked about in our previous slide. So this was an example of some of the reports in a comparison, and during our curriculum meeting, there were some suggestions just to be able to take a look back at the 2014. However, we do not want to compare the 14-15 results since they are two separate tests. But for comparative reasons, it's sort of like, and I like Mr. Copeland's analogy, it's sort of like running a 100-yard dash and then comparing that to somebody running an 800-meter dash. Two very different races, so that is the example that we'll preface here. They are two different assessments. But what we do see is how Lower Merion School District in 2015 in mathematics and ELA, which is on the left side of your screen, there were drops in student achievement in particular grade levels. As you well note, the drops across the PA Commonwealth as well. So one of the highlights that I'd like to point out is looking at the state level, comparing Pennsylvania from 2014 to 15 in grade 4, we see there was a decrease in math performance between tests of 31.5%. Where we're comparing Lower Merion School District in those same years at 4th grade, we see a decrease of 12.9%. So our decrease was much less than what the state had decreased, which is a really strong indication that we stayed well ahead of the curve with comparison to the state of Pennsylvania. You heard Mr. Copeland talk about earlier, there are some areas in grade levels where we kept constant with our performance and didn't have a shift. So we noticed that exact performance proficiency level in 5th grade among English language arts, comparing that only to reading. The writing component was a separate test, but we took a comparison from the English language arts test in 2015 with a comparison to reading, and a small decline in 6th grade as well. So we do see relative constants. This particular bar graph is taking a look at the 2015 Spring English Language Arts PSSA for the grade bands of 3 to 5 combined. So what that means is we're looking at all students across the district, grades 3, 4, and 5 combined within this chart. One of the things that I'd like to point out is this blue line. We like to call this the optimal shed pattern, and what that particularly means is that we're showing high levels of percentage of students performing at the advanced level. So the advanced level is our light blue bar that you see on the screen. To the right of that is the green bar, which represents the proficiency, and then the yellow bar, which is students in the, performing at the basic level, and our red bar performing at the below basic performance level. Our dark blue bar on this particular graph represents students that are combined proficient and advanced overall. So this is the optimal shed where we're showing high numbers of students, high percentage of students performing at the advanced level, and then slowly sliding down to our right where we have low numbers or low percentages of students performing at the below basic level. So we see constants among that. We see the ideal shed pattern of our Black and African American students, where that optimal shed pattern really starts at the proficient level. So we're looking to increase our percentage of advanced students among our Black and African American population, as well as our Hispanic. So just to give the public a flavor of what the 5th grade item sampler would look like for an evidence-based selected response, this is a very different type of response that 5th graders were asked to look at and perform within the English Language Arts PSSA. So here's a question where we're really talking about language. Students are not just having to go back to the text to answer that right there type of question that would usually jump out to a particular student when they're reading. So it's really going more deeply within a particular question and analyzing and interpreting text within this particular test. And again, vocabulary is playing a big part in answering this type of question. In the grade bands 3 to 5 for math, again, we see that optimal shed pattern among all students performing in mathematics. We have an overall percentage proficiency for the grade bands of 3 to 5 at 82%. We see the opposite or reverse of that optimal shed pattern within our Black and African American population. So that is a gap and a concern that I'd like to point out, and we will be addressing that and working with classroom teachers, looking at their reports, working with building principals. Again, this is a baseline this year in 2015 for us, and we'll be looking at the anchors and standards at the classroom level to ensure that we start reversing that shed pattern to the optimal pattern for our Black and African American students. So in terms of mathematics, this is a typical question on the mathematics PA core assessment. I'll let you read that problem. We have worked around trying to solve this problem as a group, so we like to try and play the game not smarter than a 5th grader, or am I smarter than a 5th grader? This is the type of question that students at the 5th grade level needed to respond to in terms of mathematics.
Should we ask the business administrator if he wants to?
In terms of the 2015, we're looking at the same sort of graphs and bar charts for our grades 6 through 8 all students. Again, starting here, we're looking at an overall proficiency of our middle school grade band 6 to 8 at 87.3%. A great deal of success looking here in English Language Arts, especially in our middle schools. We start off with our ideal shed pattern. We'd like to see that advanced bar higher than the proficient, as it is in our Asian population and our multiracial population within this particular chart. And again, we have seen, and there's indications for our Black and African American population, although we're at a 60.8%, we're seeing an ideal shed pattern here within our population, with a high number of percentages of students at the proficient level, with that slide starting to move down with lower numbers of students performing at the below basic, looking to increase the number of students performing at the advanced level for that particular subgroup. Here's an item sampler for 7th grade, our text-dependent analysis, which is another section of our assessment. And here we're looking at the old text-inspired prompt from the 2013-14 era of testing, and looking at the new text-dependent prompt And here you can see, again, just the way that we're asking students to analyze and look at text in a more deep fashion in the way that they respond to these particular types of questions.
And I'd point out that one of the things that I think people are genuinely concerned about is this concept of test prep and going over stuff over and over and over again, and it's nothing that we advocate. In fact, the statement that staff will often hear me say is, you know, it's not how you play it's not the game, it's how you prepare for it. And if you look at the new text-dependent prompt, you'll see that this isn't something that you're really going to sit there and you're going to prep for. This really requires some deep understanding and analysis and an ability to respond to it. I would argue that this is not a bad thing to do. This is an improvement over prior assessments.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. In terms of mathematics, we see similar shed patterns, again, being a constant. The ideal shed pattern among all students, we see a decrease in the math PSSA among our middle school students. And again, this is where at each particular grade level, when we look at a slide later down the road here, at each particular grade level, there were proficiency levels at the state in 8th grade, close to 29% proficiency rates among the Commonwealth. So when we look at those low levels of proficiency rates among the state and compare that to how our students in Lower Merion are performing, we're really doing extremely well and performing much better than what the state is overall. We wanted to take a look at a comparison of science, remembering that science was an assessment that did not change like the English language arts and mathematics. So the science PSSA remained a constant, and here we have optimal shed patterns among our groups across the board and ideal shed patterns as well. We remained at a 94.4% proficiency. So here's an example of a different cohort of students. We're looking at 4th graders that are coming in the 2012-13, the 13-14, and the 14-15 year. Again, these are new students every year coming in. We remain relatively consistent across the board relative to the state. So where you might see a slight decrease in our performance, the state also seen a slight decrease from 14 to 15, where the state students in 4th grade were achieving at a 78.8% proficiency rate in 2013-14 and had a slight decline of 77.1% in 2015.
But we're able, I think, to look at this over 3 years because the assessment did not change.
That's correct. In 8th grade, we see ideal shed or optimal shed patterns in our subgroups for all students and our Asian subgroup, as well as our white population. We have the reverse shed pattern of the optimal for our Black and African American students. And what we tend to see here, we call those opportunity gaps among our Hispanic. That's a PVOS term that they like to use for their shed patterns, where the two ends of advanced and below basic performance remain high, and there's sort of a dip or a decline within our proficient and basic categories. So that's an indication in the PVOS terms in the world that there's a focus either within curriculum or classrooms that we're really excelling or teaching enrichments to advanced students and really trying to emphasize and pull below basic students to higher levels of proficiency. And again, a comparison over 3 years, and we're able to do that again because in 8th grade science, that particular assessment did not change. We did see a decrease of about 5% within the 2 years that you see between 2013 and 2014. We're not overly concerned about this particular decrease because there are quite a few factors that play into that, such as the end number of the number of students tested could be a possibility of that number being changed. as well as shifts that are happening within the state. In 2013-14, the state average in 8th grade was at a 60.5%. We were well above that particular average in the Lower Merion School District, and they also had a drop down to 58.8% in 2014-15, where our drop was 81.8. So relative drops compared to the state, Lower Merion still remained higher than the state overall with 8th grade science. So some notes about Keystone examination. We will be taking a look at all first-time test takers in this particular presentation. The Algebra 1 first-time test takers, we will only be looking at our 8th grade population because that was a designation for Algebra for All as we looked at last year. I can note and will note that there were some sixth graders that did take the Algebra 1 Keystone exam. The 6th grade population was at 100% proficiency. Our 7th grade students, about 187 7th graders. We were at a 99.5% proficiency for 7th grade, so those numbers would not be factored in to these slides. In terms of biology, we're going to take a look at 9th grade only, and literature we'll take a look at 10th grade only. So again, with the focus on 8th grade, first-time test takers across the district, all students, there was a relative decrease compared to other slides that we may have seen in previous years because of the fact that we, in the past, were looking at all students that took the test, and here our focus was just taking a look at those 8th grade students in Algebra 1, and we see that we have a low percentage of students performing at the advanced levels among all students, and we see reverse shed patterns of the optimal. We see some ideal shed patterns, and we do see some optimal shed patterns among students of 8th grade. 9th grade biology, we're doing really, really well in terms of biology. Our 9th grade, we see many optimal shed patterns across all subgroups, most subgroups, and ideal shed patterns among others. We had an 87.7% proficiency rate among our 9th graders taking the biology Keystone for the first time at the end of course in the spring. This is up slightly from previous years of about 84%, 85% of our test takers in biology. In 10th grade literature, we see these ideal shed patterns, and it is a constant, and the focus is we see that there are high levels of students performing in the proficient category, lower numbers of students in our advanced category. Our goal and objective is to start finding ways that we can increase the percentages of students performing at the advanced levels where we can start making these ideal shed patterns look more optimal in our view. So I'd like to take the time and share some of the curriculum work, and we have our elementary and secondary folks here, supervisors, to share a little bit about the work that has been done over the summer in terms of curriculum. So with that, I'd like to just ask Lorraine and Nancy to come up and share some of the elementary curriculum work that has been taking place over the summer.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening. Thank you for giving Lorraine and I time tonight to provide elementary curriculum updates. Because the math curriculum is a living document, it is monitored, evaluated, and refined yearly where needed. The process, which is driven by teacher input and information from various district data points, it is done to ensure curriculum effectiveness and continuity of learning from one grade level to the other. Since our goal is to increase student learning over time, it is important to make sure that our curriculum reflects the essential knowledge and skills specified by the PA core standards and standards for mathematical practice, and is clearly articulated K through 6. And I say 6 because grade 5 accelerated math is 6th grade. To ensure coherence of the curriculum, this process also includes making sure there is alignment between the written curriculum and the instructional resources being used to implement the curriculum in a meaningful way that promotes good instructional practice, problem solving, and application. This also means identifying any additional resources needed to effectively differentiate instruction and engage all learners. Another integral phase of the yearly refinement process is making sure that the district assessments are also aligned to the curriculum and provide valuable information on students' understanding of the standards and their ability to apply mathematical concepts in a problem-solving situation. Math specialists and teacher teams work with me yearly to do this important work and are the teacher leaders at each building to support their colleagues in the implementation of the curriculum. During the 2015-16 school year, there will be continued professional learning opportunities on the standards for mathematical practice, helping teachers explore them deeply, observe them in action, and ultimately implement them effectively to improve mathematical teaching and learning for all students. Additionally, cross-articulation between grade levels and buildings, including the middle school, will continue to be a focus for this school year. In science at the elementary level, work was done this summer to enhance STEM opportunities for our K-5 students. A team of teachers, many of whom are in the STEM cohort, reviewed the engineering as elementary units, which are already aligned to the FOSS kits, and began development of an implementation framework that provides guidance to teachers on how to integrate those lessons into the FOSS curriculum. Other STEM resources and programs were also researched and reviewed that would provide additional opportunities for our elementary students to engage in rich STEM practices. Professional STEM learning opportunities for our elementary teachers took place during the summer and will continue throughout the year. One of those sessions will focus on the development of STEM project-based learning activities. Teachers in the Arcadia STEM Certificate Program have been instrumental in providing STEM leadership and turnaround training for their colleagues. The on-site Arcadia STEM Certificate Program, Cohorts 1 and 2, with a total of 30 elementary teachers, will participate in coursework again this year, with Cohort 1 completing the program next summer in Italy. And hopefully I will be there as well. So thank you.
Good evening. In anticipation of the implementation of the more rigorous PA core standards, we spent the summer of 2014-15 school year providing teachers with the knowledge that they needed to best tailor their instruction to teach the concepts needed to meet these goals. After analyzing the difference between our former standards, which are now called legacy standards, and the new PA core standards, we collectively agreed that writing and close reading with an emphasis on text analysis were the areas that required the greatest emphasis. Using different venues to deliver professional learning in the summer and throughout the school year, teachers engaged in workshops regarding teaching of grammar, writing workshops, and close reading, with an emphasis on text analysis. Teachers also collaboratively identified PA domains as an indicator of quality writing. You remember the anchor papers. District-wide approach to teaching writing based on a shared language and shared understanding of instruction was developed in both elementary and secondary. And we developed a K-12 scope and sequence for conventions. Elementary reading and writing resources were aligned with best practice strategies in PA core terms to assure standards were met. During the professional development days, teachers learned about and discussed practical methods for teaching the skills of deep analytical reading and how to assist students in going beyond basic understanding of a text. to develop more critical thinking about the text in a well-developed essay. Teachers also collaboratively wrote text-dependent questions. Our professional learning results showed that writing scores were strong. Our grade 3 to 5 PSSA scores were in the 90% for each grade. And that's impressive, especially this was the first year our 3rd and 4th graders ever took the writing portion of a test. More importantly than that, teachers' collaboration and the common discussion about writing increased within schools and across the district. This summer, teachers and reading specialists met to continue the work on close reading and text-dependent analysis questions to enhance our reading program. We also continued our work on professional learning in writing, on the modes of writing, and we had Academy 2 in writing, which focused on style and organization. Throughout this year, we plan to continue this work. Our curriculum, as Nancy said, is a living document, so we continually review our curriculum based on data and teacher feedback and align it with the best practices for all students to achieve the necessary grade level goals.
So moving from elementary level curriculum work to secondary level curriculum work, there was a focus over the summer with 6th grade math where curriculum was really focusing on the realignment to reflect PA core expectations, and then the focus on essential learnings needed for 6th grade success. In the science middle school, there were 3 curricular units of study that began with scientific inquiry, a focus on building skills and practicing science. In 7th grade, there was a clear focus on essential learning that is back mapped from the Keystone expectations while focusing on scientific practices from the next generation science standards while developing scientific literacy as a focus. 8th grade science, there was a focus on essential learnings and the order of presentations aligned with early 9th grade biology needs. At the high school level, biology was focused on in terms of clearly aligning our honors and college prep coursework with an emphasis on developing skills and understanding science practices. In chemistry, there was essential alignments to the 6 big ideas of chemistry with a focus on practices in building content literacy. And physics, there was a focus on alignment of content between the honors courses and the college prep courses, where we clearly align the expectations of the next generation science standards. So with that, I will turn it over to Leslie so she can speak to you regarding the humanities.
So I'd like to first thank the board for allowing me to present some of the really wonderful work that was done by some of our amazing teachers this year at Lower Merion in terms of the humanities curriculum. So it's a great honor to be able to present this to you because I think so much of this work is really worth celebrating. So I'll begin by talking about the frame that we had used. And by the way, my name is Leslie Pratt. I am the interim humanities supervisor. So for those of you who don't know me. So one of the first things that I'd like to share is the frame that we used as we were developing curriculum. And something that I want to emphasize is this frame is standards aligned, which means we are connecting everything that we do curricularly to the PA core. It is practices based, and this connects with the points that Mr. Copeland as well as Mr. Cody was making about we want students to be able to internalize certain ways of thinking and ways of doing and not focus on answering questions by rote. And they are also content rich. So we're thinking about what are these rich aspects of content that we want students to be exposed to. So those 3 stems really were an overarching structure for all of the curriculum work that was done this year in the humanities. The process for articulating the revised curriculum was driven by student need. what do our students need that will help them to not just navigate academic life and experience, but the world outside? How can we think about reading and writing in ways that make a difference in kids' lives in really meaningful ways? So that was an area of focus. As we're thinking about student need and drawing on teacher expertise, what we're also really working on is building a curriculum in its true etymological sense, and the etymology of curriculum as a set of experiences that you invite someone to feel. So it is a sense of what are the routines that students will go through that invite them to a deeper understanding of their world. In order to invite this sense of curriculum, we focused heavily on common language, and the curriculum also focused on developing explicit, demonstrable learning targets that are associated with each of the courses on which we worked this year. So that's the overarching frame for the curriculum work. Specific areas of social studies curriculum that were addressed this summer include revisions to the 6th grade social studies curriculum, revisions to the 7th grade social studies curriculum, revisions to the 8th grade social studies curriculum that focus on building these particular learning practices. The 9th grade curriculum is a new course this year. The Global 1 course is brand new for this academic school year. And so work was done to introduce a new frame for history that looks across multiple regions of the world simultaneously and is bound by time. The Global 2 course is in process of being developed this particular year, over the course of this year, and will be rolled out during the following year. 11th grade social studies was revised, as was the 12th grade government class, the 12th grade econ class, and the 12th grade psychology class. In terms of English, secondary English, there was work done in 6th grade ELA, which is piloting a collections textbook this year. There was work done on 7th grade ELA, 8th grade ELA, 9th grade ELA, 10th grade ELA. In 12th grade, there was specific work done on a nonfiction course, and there was also another new course that was rolled out this year entitled Sports and Society, and final curriculum work was completed for Sports and Society over the summer. In terms of high school literacy, this is something that I'm particularly excited about. In terms of high school literacy, our literacy specialists across both high schools worked together over the course of the last year, and they have developed a framework for reading at the secondary level. And they've also developed a reading rubric that can be used within contents and across disciplines. So the idea of embedded literacy instruction is something that we are working very diligently to include in all aspects of the curriculum, and working to infuse it within all areas of the humanities, as well as across math and science. And so that's an update on the curriculum work that was done in secondary humanities. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Just before we open it up to questions, let me indicate that the work that I've seen so far has really been fine. I'm really impressed with what these folks have been talking about in terms of a lot of professionally led discussions, and I think it really has made a significant difference. Questions?
Please, Diane.
Thanks, and thanks for the adjustment to the presentation. I think it really helped. I just have a couple of questions. Regarding the 10th grade literature for first-time test takers, the fact that there were so few students at the advanced level, especially considering how strong our students are on the PSATs, it seems like a disconnect. And do we have a reason why those advanced numbers are low? I mean, I would think our advanced levels would be as high there as they are in other grades, and it seems like it's a significant drop. I mean, is our curriculum different than what the state test is testing?
So in terms of the overall advanced proficient score, we're at a 92%.
Right.
In terms of the number of advanced students, we tend to be around 30%. And in terms of the number of proficient students, we're in the 60s, typically in terms of the percentage of students. And it's a pattern that we've seen consistently since the Keystone exams have been put in place. It's also the same pattern that we see in the 7th and 8th grade PSSA, the new version of the 7th and 8th grade PSSA, where we see that same trend. And so the question that you're asking in terms of why don't we have more students scoring advanced, that's the very question that we're asking right now as we're looking through this information as teachers and working to infuse instruction with ways that can push our students into that advanced category. So some of the things that we've been thinking about doing and some of the feedback that the exams are inviting us to share with teachers are these kind of higher level questions that are going to push students out of minimum proficiency. And so things like, how do we invite students to be able to make more complex inferences? Because that's the difference between responses that are advanced and it's responses that are proficient. So a proficient student is able to make, they're able to make inferences, but advanced students are able to make inferences that are much more sophisticated. And so how do we provide those kind of opportunities in class? The question you're asking is the very question that we're thinking about in light of all of the ELA results we have.
So if we were to look at our PSAT results,
I'm looking at the PSSA.
No. I'm saying if we look at our PSAT results, which we always have a bunch of national merit semifinalists, and
Right.
you compare our SAT scores to other districts, we're quite high. Does the SAT test differently than the PSSA? Because it seems like the Keystones, I'm sorry, yes. Thank you.
It does.
So, and I don't care that number is low. If we like what we're teaching in our classes and we feel that we're doing the right thing, if that number is low because we're not teaching them higher level thinking skills, then that's something different.
Well, I do think that we're teaching students higher level thinking skills. The House of Advanced on the Keystone, it's a small house.
Okay.
And so when we're thinking about the House of Proficient, that house is much larger. And so to move students from proficient to advanced, there are some very sophisticated practices, and not just skills, things that we learn by rote, but very sophisticated practices that our students need to internalize over time by reading more often, by reading more widely, by thinking about how they can make logical leaps for more complex inferencing. So right now, your question is the question that is being asked in almost every English language arts classroom right now. How do we move our proficient students into that world of advanced, and what kind of practice can we give them so that they are more nimble in being able to do that?
And as I said, I care less about the score and more about the content of what we're teaching. My second question, and this is particularly in regards to elementary level. Do we ever, I know we don't get the test results back till the summer, so it's really not helpful for the teachers who have the students at that time. But I'd be really curious if the third grade teachers look at the test results from the kids that they had in third grade and say, well, that one makes sense, that one makes sense. That if you had asked me to guess what this student was going to get on this test, does it align? And then when it doesn't, is it a lot of kids that don't align with teacher expectation versus test result? Is it are they pretty closely aligned? Do we have a sense of that?
But, you know, therein lies my frustration with the way that these are used. If this were done in a way, if I were in charge, what I would do is I would return everyone's test, and I would return it so that you could look at every one of the items, and you could say, okay, nobody in the universe that we deal with got question 34 right. Now, is it because question 34 was a bad question, or is it because we have to adjust what we do for question? When you can't get that, it becomes frustrating, and that's why I'm not in charge.
No. And you know, that's ideal.
And you know,
but
I have
still-
to tell you, when I was a kid growing up in New York, that's the way the Regents was. They handed, first of all, the teachers, heaven forbid, actually the ones who graded the test, okay, graded the state test, and then they could look and they could say, look at this. We see a pattern here. Maybe this is something within our curriculum we need to address. When you can't do that, you've removed the assessment one step away from instruction, and that's part of my frustration with the
Right,
process.
and I share that frustration, but I mean, my question is even much more general, which basically is, I'm the teacher, I'm teaching Susie. If you ask me, I think Susie should have scored advanced on that test, but she got below basic. Why is there, I really thought Johnny was only going to get proficient and he got advanced. I mean, are we doing that kind of thing, or once the tests are done, they're done, we don't care about them, we put them away?
We run a report in Performance Tracker, which is our database where we track all of our achievement data in terms of PSSA and benchmark data. Teachers run a report called the Assessment Score Report, and what that does is break down each particular anchor and provide a specific proficiency level in terms of the raw points that are scored. We do that for PSSA, we do that for Keystone. More importantly, to get after the question that you're really asking, for the PSSA and Keystone, we can't see that test. We are developing our local tests and benchmarks, one at 9th grade with the Keystone Literacy diagnostic, as well as our elementary levels. So that way we could actually go back and take a look at the item analysis of those particular tests. And that's where we're really trying to keep our focus in terms of standardized assessments and standards to really keep track so that we can find a way as to where students are sort of falling off and either a teacher not teaching to a particular standard yet, or if they've been teaching it heavily, it's sort of our way of making sure that we're covering what we need to cover and cover things that we haven't taught.
Right. Let me try asking this just one more time. Are the kids, you're getting to a level of detail that Mr. Copeland was hoping to get to, where a teacher can actually learn what the student doesn't know by the test, which is ideal. But what I'm just saying is, generally, do we have a sense that that a student performs on the test at a level that we expected them to?
On a general level, yes, you can do that. On a general level. And on a school and district level, when we aggregate the scores, we can see some big picture areas where we have strengths and some big picture areas where we have needs. Absolutely. But on an idiosyncratic or individual level, when you could look at it and you can say, I don't understand, kid's getting an A all year long or getting strong, and then he dropped down. And there is where there's a limitation, quite frankly, on any assessment. Because on any given day, kids can perform in a variety of different ways, and this is a moment in time, not a cumulative data of what a kid's year is. So
Right,
it's
but if 80% of the kids are not scoring where we thought
Absolutely.
they would score, that's a
absolutely,
big red
and that
flag.
information you can find.
And we generally will track that, those particular projections through our PVOS reports that come out later in the fall.
Thank you. Ms. Agnew.
Thank you, and this maybe is a different way of asking a similar question. And I appreciate the extensive update and also how much change these tests have catalyzed and all the work involved to kind of get the schools ready for dealing with this. I thought you had some very good context for parents at the beginning of the presentation about what these tests are and are not, and I encourage everyone to go back and reread that because I thought that was explained very well. But my question is, given, all this change and with these new tests and now kind of all the things that you're initiating to better prepare students or to kind of expand the curriculum to reflect kind of where education is going, maybe more diplomatically put, I'm just wondering when would be a good baseline year? Like typically how long does it take to implement some of these new initiatives or new ways of learning so that it would actually be directly reflected in these tests? Or does that set point not exist?
No, I think this is a baseline year. This is the
Okay.
first year of the assessment. But again, I want to emphasize, and I think you could see a little bit of it in some of the sample questions that we chose. We really want to build a strong instructional, we want to build on what's already been done. This is a strong program of study. We want a consistently strong architecture of instructional design. And if we do that, and we worry about good instruction or superior instruction, the test scores will take care of themselves. And we
Okay.
won't have to, and it's sort of been a thing with me. I don't want to chase numbers.
Sure.
Because that, I think, is an inappropriate way to do it. But if you build a really good, strong program, if you look at some of those questions that were there, it's what we value. You can't look at them and say, oh, I don't care about that. It's
Right.
text dependent, it's going in and making an analysis, and those are lifelong skills. And those are, and I would say we've got, it's a worthy building onto what we have to make sure that that takes place.
So-
Then you can look back and you say, you know what, if there are some gaps in some of the things that we did, or we have to re-engineer, then you re-engineer in a positive way.
Okay, so I guess my real question is, how will you evaluate the effectiveness of all these new initiatives you just talked about?
Well, he's staring at you. One of the strategies that I've discussed with the board is I think we have to move in a stronger direction in terms of program evaluation. And I think program evaluation is where you begin to say, okay, here's what we put in place. Now we need to draw a line between what we put in place and the results that we're looking at. And the results and those results can be varied. It doesn't have to be a particular measure in a particular point in time. In fact, that's what program evaluation is. You go in and you look at your curriculum and you go and you see your scope and your sequence and you say, you know what? We thought we were doing something that was going to give us particular results, and those results may be increased numbers of students in honors classes and AP classes as opposed to a particular number on a test. So the evaluative criteria you place on it, the real way you do a program evaluation is before you adopt the program, you say, what do I want to see as goals and objectives? And then you do the program evaluation to see whether you were there.
Okay, thank you. That's.
Then
what I
I'll
was-
stop.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? You have one? Ben?
Thank you. Brian, I'm going to have you jump through 6 slides, because I don't know, just bear with me. If you can go to slide 10 first. Because I'm looking across like 6 slides, and I'm wondering, so if I have this right, this is the elementary school English, right?
English language arts, yes.
Right, okay. Our African-American students were advanced or proficient, 65% of them were. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. So if you can jump then to slide 12, which I think is math. Our African-American students were advanced and proficient only 39 or 40%.
Correct.
Okay, if we do the same look in middle school, which I think is slide 14. Again, English, I'm getting 60% African-American students advanced proficient. But in math, we got only about 24, 25%.
Correct.
So I'm wondering, my first question is if we're having, well, we still have a gap in both unacceptable, the gap seems worse in math than English. Then, I don't know if that's true, but then the reason if you could jump to slide 19, which is science in 8th grade, again, our African-American students were only advanced or proficient 35%. So I'm wondering, last class question, and then slide 23, which is biology. Our African-American students were advanced or proficient 60%. I don't know if there's here's where I'm going, finally, with all that. I don't know if you can answer this, but is there a correlation in our weaker math that's translating into weaker performance in science? And what's jumping at me is, and this is awful for me to say this, biology from the three, biology, chemistry, physics, my recollection from biology when I took it a million years ago is it's less math heavy. I'm just trying to get a sense of two questions. Why are we such large disparities between English and math? And then as we look at science later on, is that possibly not help, that those bad outcomes early on are leading to bad performance or underperformance in science?
One of the things that you're doing is sort of the basis of our descriptive statistics. You're looking at it, you're saying one question leads to others. And the answer is, at least from my perspective, I don't know yet. But those are the kinds of questions we ask, and you've placed them well, then we go back and say, how come that happened? And what further information do we need to know to begin to answer that? So you want to look at the content, you want to look at the scope, you want to look at how kids did on midterms, because teacher-made tests are often a gold standard, and you want to get a sense as to what took place there. If you looked at some of the questions, you'll see that there was a significant vocabulary component to some of the questions. So you want to know a lot of things that this isn't necessarily going to tell you. And that's what these folks do when they sit. If you were able to do what I did and walked in some of the high schools during the course of the summer and you saw teachers gather together with administrators doing just what you're saying. How come this happened? What process do we have to do? You'd be very proud to see the appropriate way the professionals in Lower Merion are attacking some of these issues and asking the same questions you just answered. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the answer for you right now, but that's what we're diving into.
Thank you for jumping.
Sure.
I'm just following up on that. I just wanted, I really appreciate the presentation, and the curriculum committee had an extended version of this presentation last week? Was it only
Wednesday.
last week? Was it only Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Okay. And I really appreciate it, and I think you addressed many of our, we wanted some further information. One thing that was helpful was when you talked about, and I don't remember exactly who spoke about it, I think it was you, Brian, the Algebra 1 first-time test takers comparison, which I know you've explained, is that these are kids who were in grade level math, right? So the kids who had been in accelerated math are not part of these numbers. We spent a lot of time last year going over a new sequence for algebra that I think is related to this. So I'm wondering if it might be helpful for you to sort of talk about that a little bit so that parents understand the relation between the new sequence.
Sure. So we had an opportunity over the past year to be working with members from the Pennsylvania Department of Education focused around algebra. And we knew that students were not facing a whole lot of success in 8th grade for Algebra for All. So we did extensive work to learn about options that we have to put our students in the most successful position possible to learn. So instead of this year, instead of testing students at the end of the Algebra 1 course, we will be testing students at the end of the Algebra 2 course, not at the end of the Algebra 2, let me go back, mid-semester of Algebra 2. So for most test takers, the winter session is a retest opportunity. For students in the Algebra 2, that will be considered their end of course at the end of the first semester during Algebra 2. And at that particular moment, students in Algebra 2 will be taking their Algebra Keystone exam, which would be affording students the opportunity to go through an entire year of Algebra 1, an entire year of geometry, and one semester of Algebra 2 to really get the foundational knowledge and skills necessary to be successful. So that was a big shift that we made in terms of taking the Algebra Keystone. So what does that mean in terms of grade level? If we have a student in 6th grade taking the Algebra 1 course, that student would then take geometry in 7th grade and move on to Algebra 2 in 8th grade. So that 6th grade student who took the Algebra 1 course would then test in the winter of their 8th grade year in Algebra 2. And that cycle just follows through. So it's the Algebra 2 class that we'll be focusing on for that Keystone exam.
Dr. Golden? Oh, sorry, you have-
My question is related to Melissa's, also about the Algebra Keystone. So you mentioned, though you didn't have a slide, you kind of mentioned in passing that the proficient and advanced rates for the 6th and 7th graders who are in some variant of accelerated math were 99 or 100%. And so, but we're slowing down the algebra sequence for these students, but the other students, it's accelerated. So just by logic, shouldn't we, maybe the problem is that these students are not in a rigorous enough or accelerated enough math, and that we should be pushing them more quickly, treating them, holding them to a higher standard, and then they'd maybe be doing better on the Keystone?
I think that in terms of looking at 6th and 7th grade students that are seated in the Algebra 1 class, accelerated already. 8th grade, we were looking at students that was considered their on-level grade math. Outside of looking to students in the accelerated programs in 6th and 7th grade. And we've noticed struggles with students at that particular level because they didn't have the required skills or strategies at that grade level to...
But maybe that's because we've been tracking them and slowing them down all along instead of challenging them and giving them the more rigorous curriculum in 5th grade and 6th grade and 7th grade.
I think
The hypothesis.
I think one of the things that folks have been looking at, you're talking about the Algebra for All, is that, and math teachers frankly have been saying this in one way or another for a number of years, that, you know, there's a maturity level and a developmental level that sometimes you need to let kick in. And one of the things you don't want to do is sort of convince a kid that they're not a good math student until maybe they've grown into the ability to conceptualize a little bit differently. So I think it's fair to say that this was the issue that arose during the course of the discussion, and that was the reason for the re-examination. I think there was a point in time everybody said, you know, we want everybody to get out of 8th grade with algebra, and I think after some examination, we think that maybe that was a bridge too far.
I try to say just one last time, I don't want to beat this to death, but I'm saying maybe if we treated these students like we were treating the accelerated students that are passing these tests with flying colors, 99, 100%, if we treated them the same, maybe they would perform better. Maybe we're not taking them seriously enough as students of math.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It's just a hypothesis, but it's the opposite of what we're doing this year.
To be honest with you, I'm not sure. I think I was where you were, and over the last several years, probably the last 10 years, math teachers have convinced me that maybe, shockingly enough, I don't know what I'm talking about.
I just want to say, because I think there's been a lot of shifts going on, is that we spent, I think, about at least four curriculum meetings over a period of time discussing this, and these issues were discussed pretty thoroughly around just exactly those kinds of concerns, and there was a lot of discussion around ensuring that kids from all groups, I mean, there are a lot of these kids who had the opportunity to do algebra over a longer period of time did better, later on, and that we were doing, what Bob is suggesting, which is that you're telling kids before they're ready that they're not successful in math. So I just want to make it clear that that was in fact discussed, thoroughly. It wasn't unaddressed in those discussions.
Dr. O'Leary?
Thank you for bringing that up, Melissa, because I think the curriculum committee and the people working with the math curriculum did a really good job of sort of stepping back and looking at something and saying, we'd really like to tweak this and improve it, and I think that's fabulous. My question has to do with the kids who didn't pass the Keystone. There's a lot of state requirements for what we do next, and how are we managing the implications for those kids who are sort of in this transition period of our curriculum?
Why don't we have Rich talk about the remedial program?
So when the curriculum for math was revised, and I'm just going to speak very quickly, when you talk about this accelerated 6th grade, 7th graders, you have to really account for, and we program for, their aptitude. They are not like the other kids that way. You can call it a gift. We all can learn math. There's no doubt about that. We all believe that. We all know that. There are certain children that math comes to a lot faster and a lot quicker, and it's measured by aptitude. And those accelerated students get that opportunity. So that's for me the remarkable difference. So if you're referring directly, Dr. O'Leary, to the 9th graders, so having come out of Algebra 1 as an 8th grader, now in 9th grade geometry, the students will not be given any sort of remediation period or coverage. They will carry their full regular schedule with an elective possibility. Starting in this year, moving on to next year, when they will take Algebra 2, there will be 2 components to remediation. One is those students scoring basic or below basic with certain deficits that are marked and measured, they will have a remediation lab 2 days out of a 4-day cycle. They have to report to it like a class. Those students who have higher, let's say, very close to the proficient range, they will be checking in with teachers. And they can use a mixture of doing a little bit extra reporting with the teacher, sitting with the teacher during lunch and learn, or participating in the remediation lab if they have it in their schedule. If they want it, or if they don't have something, then it's going to be put into their schedule. So there's a little wiggle room for the kids at the top, so to speak. As far as biology, when a student's a 9th grader, they take biology at the end of the year. We got the scores back. Those students are in remediation now with remediation specialists. Again, 2 out of the 4 days a week. They will, if they're ready, they will retest in biology mid-year. If they're not ready, they'll continue through and they will test at the end of the year. Okay, as far as literature, Dr. Pratt?
So in terms of literature, there is a parallel system of support set up for students who are not yet proficient on the Keystone exam. So once students are identified as not yet proficient, built into their schedule in ways that don't impact their ability to take electives. There's some very strategic scheduling done, and that's always weighed, how will this impact the schedule? There is an opportunity for students to meet with a literacy specialist either once or twice a cycle, depending on the demonstrated need of that particular student. And then the student will be presented with an opportunity to retake the Keystone exam in December, should they be ready. And if they are not ready, they'll have extended time to work with with a literacy specialist and be able to retake that at year's end. And for this academic year, the population of students we're talking about is about 25 at each of the high schools who would need to consider retaking this exam.
And you all remember at the, probably late last spring, we came to the curriculum committee of the board to discuss the use of summer school to cover some of the PBAs, so the project-based assessment, when students, particularly our students that need to learn differently, when they are not successful on 2 or 3 of the exams, we never wanted to burden them. We don't want their schedules to be blocked with constant remediation. So we started this year, and it was very, very successful. I don't know the numbers, so please don't ask me. But upwards of 20, maybe, Kimberly, 27 students for biology? I'm sorry? 22 or 27 remains with me. Set it up for 4 weeks. All the students were done within 3 weeks. We have found that sustained blocks of time got them through the remediation program of the project-based assessment very well. At week's end, I think 8 students were complete. At the second week, all but 4 were complete. By the end of the 3rd week, everybody was complete. And remember, we asked for additional funding at that time, and we were cautious about that, and it seemed to have worked very well. We have had discussions about building on programs just like that summer program, so students' schedules were not overburdened, and we will continue to look at that.
Thank you. Your additional questions?
Can I just follow up on that? So we're not worried when 2017 rolls around and all our students have to have passed all 3 of these to graduate? We're confident that we will not have any students not graduating as a result of their being not proficient on these tests. I'm not saying that very clearly.
I am very confident. I think we are leaders in this county, in this state. I think we are fortunate enough not to have a base that we can overcome. What our hurdles are is just like I think everybody is reaching those students who learn very differently, because we have to try every which way to get them to get it. On top of that, you are aware that there is a waiver that the superintendent can enforce. So that's why I stand before you and say every student will graduate that possibly can with complete,
Thank you, Mr. Marta. You can return to your seat.
Any final questions? Thank you again to the curriculum team. Mr. Cody, you have any final remarks on the presentation?
I am fine.
Okay, wonderful. It's such an arduous task, we recognize, particularly in September, to pull all this data together and provide the level of thoughtfulness and information for the board and the public. So I just want to publicly thank Mr. Copeland for ensuring that we begin the year with really thinking critically about what this means, particularly as it aligns with the strategic plan. So again, thank you to you all.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so now we will have audience recognition on agenda or non-agenda items. If you would like to give public comment at this time, please sign in with Ms. LaPere or Ms. Jenkins. You know the routine.
My name is Ruth Jenkin. I live at 354 Worcester Road. Couple of issues. There has been a congregation of students on the corner of Worcester and Hamilton all of last year, the year before, and of course this year as well. They're not criminals. They're out there smoking, even though they're not supposed to be out of the building. But this past couple of days, a new wrinkle has been added, and it is graffiti. And it's a graffiti that has a profanity base to it. And it is somewhere the school must have some responsibility to see that our neighborhood is respected. as it has a tremendous impact on this local area. I would like some of you to walk around the neighborhood in the early morning when the students are speeding through the neighborhood looking for parking spaces, when parents are making illegal U-turns while there are pedestrian students and bicycling students. Things don't just happen inside the building, they happen outside the building as well. With all the academics that are going on, I think we're missing citizenship, what being a good neighbor is, what being a good citizen is, what the responsibility is of these students being part of our neighborhood. We have contacted Mr. Hughes, and there will be a meeting of the community, but I thought that you should know about it before this item takes place, because it may be in a couple of weeks. The other question I had was, over the last several years, I have been encouraging, with response to the achievement gap, to have a full-day kindergarten for those students that are identified as at risk. Easily identified by the kindergarten teacher in the first part of the year, and then once they're identified, to put them into a full-day program so that by the 3rd grade and the 5th grade and the 7th grade, when they're taking these assessment tests, they're not already behind the 8 ball. The program was put in as a pilot program. I don't know what the assessments or the outcomes, or if the program is still in existence. I would like some answers as far as that's concerned, and if there's been an evaluation, and will it continue? I've also encouraged it, as was talked about here, to go through the summer with these students so that they don't lose everything by the time they get back to 1st grade. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a wraparound program, but I don't know enough about it to know. But I know that there is a wraparound kindergarten program for identified students. That's,
Is it 2 years now that we've had that program?
Right.
So I wonder if it were possible to look at how those students are doing in 2nd and 3rd grade, or whatever grade that puts them in at this point, 1st and 2nd, and see if they're, it might be a good time.
I believe we've done that through curriculum committee of the board. Usually toward the spring and before school ends, we get reports from the elementary team in terms of not just the students that are currently in the program. And Melissa, you help me out. Not in the program, but also, what their trajectory has been, and what the some of the impact, both quantitative and qualitative, in terms of their progression through the early elementary grades, particularly once they get to that PSSA level. So I'm assuming you're asking for more of that, but there is a lot of that data, Ms. Jenkins, on the website, and we'll certainly take that up as a board and as a curriculum committee, because we're interested as well. So thank you again for the question. Okay, so, any more questions? All right, so no more public comment. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you for coming. Our business meeting will be this coming Monday, September the 28th. This room, 8:00 p.m.